Hello everybody. So today we are going to be looking at this video starring Alex O'Connor. I'm just waiting until I can hear my own voice playing as I am, playing the... I'm playing my own voice, I'll hear my own live stream, except I have not yet heard it, so... But if I click here, I'm playing my own voice, right? Okay, cool. So, my own live stream. Basically, we're going to be looking at this video, which is, two videos. Alex O'Connor recently made a video saying Christianity is more plausible than I thought, and then channel favorite channel Mindshift made a video responding to it saying, oh, Alex, you're wrong, it's not more plausible than you thought, or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, so obviously what we're going to do is watch the Alex O'Connor video, give some thoughts on that, and then we're going to watch the Mindshift video. I will say, so Alex also then has recently made a video where he has bemoaned people exaggerating the significance of this video. And that means that I now know in advance that he would not like me doing that. But I will just say, for the record, that I did not plan. Obviously, I plan out what videos I'm going to respond to. If I see a video, I'm like, oh, let's do a response to that. But I don't start streaming right away. So I've been knowing that I was going to do this response for a while. And I never was planning on exaggerating the idea of Alex O'Connor becoming a Christian or anything like that. Mostly because, in my heart of hearts, I worry that even if he did become a Christian, he'd probably become some kind of like false religion, like Eastern Orthodoxy or something like that. I don't know, whatever. So yeah, I'm not the kind of person who's very quick to start simping about someone who's like, oh, they're about to start agreeing with me. Anyway, so with that said, we will jump into the video. Nobody's here, which is curious because usually, we've had a slightly more active live chat these previous few times, so this makes me think perhaps people haven't seen, so I will just in accordance with that copy the link so everyone can be aware of it, because it would be a shame for people to not be aware. So I'll just put that and then we'll start. Well, I'll start playing the video and I'll post the link just because I'm sure nothing too exciting will happen.
I talk about this and I debate this all the time, and I debate whether Jesus was God or whether he even claimed to be God and all of this kind of stuff. But for me, the undeniable thing is that there's this extraordinary historical figure who did something extraordinary. And there's something really weird that happened that caused a bunch of people to start quite early on worshipping him, which is a very strange thing to do to a human being, especially in a Jewish culture. And so, to me, getting at the Gospels from a scholarly perspective helps me to understand who this historical figure was. That's the thing I'm really interested in, almost in the way that somebody might be really interested in Julius Caesar or in whether the Iliad, whether the Trojan War really happened and whether that kind of stuff. I sort of take this approach.
That feels to me.
So, and that is quite dangerous, because there is a point at which if you start obsessing over the idea of Christianity and the gospel as this really interesting intellectual thing, you are, perhaps more so than even if you are actively disdainful of the gospel, blocking yourself off to a spiritual encounter with it. And I do think that is the issue, because I know Alex has said, oh, why is it that I haven't had any spiritual experience? Like, I've prayed to God to give me a spiritual experience. I want to know if this is true. But then, he is admitting that the primary way he engages with it is as if it's an intellectual hobby rather than, something he's really going to have a spiritual encounter with. So, yeah, whatever.
Like, that was your point of entry.
Yes. Yeah.
But you've had such a journey and you've met so many amazing people and you've debated so many different angles and things. Yeah. Where's it led you to?
It's led me to, I used to be quite on board with the new atheism stuff. I've spoken about this a lot on my show.
What does that mean?
You know, like the sort of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, it was really popular, the debates that they were doing, they called it new atheism. Yeah. And it was this body of like atheist thought with the God delusion, this kind of stuff, which was really popular. And it had this sort of quite strident, debate me bro kind of attitude. And I was really swept up by that. I thought that was really exciting and cool. And I was beginning to sort of shake that off and grow up a bit, essentially. And then
it's interesting, of course. It was only just a few videos ago. Possibly, was it our last video? I think it was the video before last. At the end of that video, we responded to some of Alex O'Connor's shorter, older videos where he did have that new atheist vibe to him, which really didn't go away until the end of the 2010s. Obviously, Christopher Hitchens died in 2011, but I think that like vibe of people making that kind of content still continued for a while after that, but it's not really a thing now.
Running the podcast, what I've realized is that this is far more interesting and intricate, and I would say plausible than I'd given it credit for before. So, I'm still not a Christian. Some people,
right. The only problem with there not being anybody in the chat, like I don't mind people not being in the chat, but someone's got to let me know how the audio is, because I will punch someone if someone shows up and then they start commenting like, oh, by the way, Alex O'Connor's like twice as loud as you. So anyway, I don't really have anything to say, but whatever. He's just saying what he's saying.
Will say to me like,
it's a funny word though, that anyway.
Yeah.
Like I'm less and less certain about the word.
Yeah.
You know what somebody said?
It's a little louder than you. Thank you. Nice to see someone's there. Oh, someone else says audio is fine. All right. Well, I'll split the difference, turn down a tiny bit.
You're lightning.
So, hello, Eon Tempest and Richard. Yes, good to have you here. Let's see. Okay.
Yes. The period of greatest growth ever in the history of the church was from 33 AD to
Hello, Emmanuel.
350.
Yeah.
And during this time, there was no...
No. The period... Well, again, that's one of those things where it's kind of like relatively speaking, right? Because he's saying 33 AD to 3350, but then like wasn't... Well, I don't even know if that's true. I don't think that is true. Because I was going to be like, oh, the church was just like 12 people, but it wasn't really. Like Jesus Christ had thousands of followers. I'm pretty sure Jesus Christ got more people saved by preaching the gospel than anyone else has managed. So with that said, I don't think there was this massive growth from 33 AD to whatever you said, 350 or whatever. Because obviously, as we know, most people early on believed false gospels. I would say that the real period where the church grew dramatically would be Protestant Reformation and the invention of the printing press, because that's when people could actually start spreading ideas themselves without being pushed down and oppressed and repressed by the religious authorities of the time.
Church buildings.
Yeah.
No sermons.
Yeah.
But no singing.
Yeah.
And no Bible.
Yeah.
And like we get very tied up in all of those things and the labels and even the phrase Christian.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not sure where for me it feels quite like man-made, these sort of words.
Yeah, and
whatever. So the thing about the term, the whole like, oh, no church, no blah blah blah. Yeah, obviously, I mean you do what you can, but we shouldn't be like, oh, because they didn't have this stuff in the past, therefore it doesn't matter, we don't have it now. And also saying like no Bible, it's like, well, kind of, but they still had a lot of the scripture pretty early on. The interesting thing is that like him saying like, oh, even the term Christian. It is worth noting that the term Christian in the Bible, I believe I'm right in saying, is it? I think it's only ever used by non-Christians. I'm trying to think if there's a single time when a Christian says not. I mean, obviously, it says they were first called Christians in Antioch, and I believe one of the Roman judges who's looking at Paul says, oh, I've heard something about you Christians, whatever. So. I've heard it therefore argued that really we should call ourselves Baptists and not Christians, because obviously, I mean, John is called John the Baptist. There's like an argument there. I think the only issue of that, just because it is something I do occasionally think about, is that if you say, oh, we're not going to call ourselves Christians, then you run into the issue of, for most people, Christian means like a follower of Jesus, and therefore you are ceding that title to people who aren't following Jesus at all. So I think actually the people who genuinely obey the teachings of Christ should probably lay claim to the title Christian.
That is where I can definitely agree with, especially a Christian of your kind, which is to say someone who will say that and recognize that. Because some people place a lot of stock, particularly Catholics, they place a lot of stock in church tradition and the traditions that developed after Nicaea. And I look at that with a similar kind of man-made skepticism.
Ooh, Alex O'Connor, base dark? Whoa.
And I think to myself, yeah, like it also gives me license to, when I look at the New Testament and I think, some scholars think that Paul maybe didn't write that letter and that's a big problem. But for someone like me, it's like, who cares? If I decide that Paul didn't write 1 Timothy, then I'll just look at the rest of it and I'll try to work out what came between the lines. A good friend of mine.
Yeah, I think so. I don't like this because I think that you have to accept that it is a package deal, because as soon as you start saying, oh, I'm going to use scripture to infer what, or I'm going to use this scholarly stuff, scriptural scholarship, to start talking about, oh, what actually is part of the Bible, what parts can I throw out, then you've got a massive issue, because obviously you don't know for certain that the current scholarship is right, but the other issue you have there is that when you understand, like, if you do believe that God exists, because obviously he's talking here about how should you engage with Christianity, but if you're going to take any of it seriously, you have to recognize that it's talking about a God who exists, and then I don't think you can say, oh, therefore I'm going to say that I don't believe this is legitimate, as if God wouldn't have got rid of it if it wasn't legitimate. And that's why I always defend a providential view of biblical preservation, because otherwise you're just creating so many complicated issues. I know someone who's like, oh, I believe the entire Bible, but I don't think that the Song of Solomon is scriptural. And I don't know what their arguments are, whatever. But I also think, apart from anything else, it just seems like you're creating so much stress for yourself by having to think in terms of, okay, I've got to be the person who is an expert. And this is what, and I know someone's going to say, well, hold on a minute, isn't it the same when you say scripture alone? Doesn't that mean you're saying people have to put the pressure on themselves to interpret? But here's the difference. It's not hard to interpret scripture. It's very easy to read the word of God and work out what it's saying. And if it's very complicated, those are about unimportant issues. But knowing that a certain book wasn't actually written by who it claimed to be written by and stuff like that, you need like expert knowledge on that, and knowledge that might not even be available to human beings. So yeah, I just don't think it's a good idea to go down this path of like, oh, I'm going to believe the Bible, but then start getting rid of all of these different pieces of scripture that I don't think are right.
And said to me once, when there's all this discussion about whether we have the real words of Jesus and whether the Gospels are accurate and whether it's all apocryphal stories, he said that because these were written from early church traditions, Jesus was a real man who was doing real things, we can still know a lot about the character of Jesus. He said, imagine if, for example, have you heard of the Churchillian drift, where like quotes get attributed to Churchill, even though he never said them? Same thing happens with C.S. Lewis. Yeah. And he said, imagine if the only information you had historically about Churchill was a book of apocryphal quotes that he never actually said, but that people believed he said. You'd still get a pretty good picture of the kind of person Winston Churchill was.
That's worst case scenario. You still get a pretty good...
You're still getting an image. And so I'm really interested in the scholarly stuff and like, well, did Jesus really say that? Was this an interpolation? Blah, blah, blah. Is this a translation thing? But the thing that's most fascinating to me below all of that is like, who was this guy and what was he doing to...
That's I think I like that. I think that's a pretty good argument for Christianity, to say, well, even if we don't, and obviously it's a steel-manned argument against the opposition, because you can say, well, even if there are issues with knowing exactly how accurate the Bible is in the way it describes Jesus, the type of stuff that's being said, the type of, if you like, stories people are making up, would still tell us who Jesus was, because people make up stories based on the kind of person someone was. And that's true, to be fair. Like, even, people who are just, I know some people who've just been telling blatantly obvious lies, but even then, when they're telling you the lie, you can recognize where they're getting the lie from, and like how they think this is a plausible lie to be telling about someone. Like I don't know if you've had that experience, but yeah, I've had experiences where I've like been speaking to someone like, I know you're lying about this story. I know this isn't actually how it happened, but it is a plausible story based on who these people are.
Cause all of this, even if it's a bunch of confusion and confused timelines, and even if some stories got in there that shouldn't have got in there, the fact.
Why do you think so-called atheists are so obsessed with Jesus? I will say, I think that it's kind of an interesting situation, because it's worth noting, depending on how you define atheist, a lot of people who don't believe in God genuinely do not care and do not talk about Jesus, because obviously the people who fall into that category, you just aren't going to see them talk about it. People who talk about atheism, I think one reason why they would come back to Jesus a lot is because atheism isn't really making very many claims. And then when you look at the claims it is making, it's kind of not great for them. Because, like, for example, if an atheist wanted to talk about how the universe came into existence, they've got a problem, because there aren't really very many credible explanations apart from God. So it makes sense in a way that they focus on talking about religions. Of course, the funny thing is that Alex O'Connor claims that he is an agnostic rather than an atheist. But yeah, I think like that's the main reason. If people are talking about this issue a lot, then there's not really, because Christianity has so many more claims and is such a popular religion, they, I think, default to talking about that. Because just like if Alex O'Connor just exclusively spent his time talking about atheism, it would be, I think, very boring. I don't think anyone would really care.
That this scramble to write all of this down and turn it into
even with the drift.
Exactly, it's still
I mean, you have to give Alex some credit, which is that at least ostensibly he seriously does want to know whether or not Christianity is true. They don't talk about Muhammad, so I think there are issues that but genuinely I will say this, I think in a way, praise God, because I believe that Islam is so obviously nonsense that we should for the most part not talk about it. I don't think we should take it seriously, and I think it's a good thing that atheists don't spend time talking about Islam as a serious religion, because it establishes something which I think is genuinely true, which is Christianity is the default true religion. If there is a religion that is true, it is Christianity, because it is so much better than, or so much more credible than any other religion. That I think just gets slept on so much. But yeah, in a way, it's kind of like the reason why maybe you don't talk about how, apart from, and obviously we could talk about the dangers of that, but I think the other issue there is that there isn't actually as much to talk about making it obvious it's false. And I also think that's a problem for atheists, right? Because if atheists talk about Muhammad too much, then there's only so much you can say about him before it becomes totally obvious he was a false prophet. And then you've run into the issue of, you've now made it clear that actually there is this obviously false religion, and that kind of takes away a very common atheist argument, which is, well, all religions are basically the same, you can't really pick between one religion and the other, so it's not really rational to believe in a particular religion. If you talk about Muhammad for a long time, you're like, oh, hold on, wait, this actually isn't a very credible religion at all, and it is even less credible when contrasted with Christianity. So actually it does make sense that people would say certain religions are credible and certain aren't. I don't know if you saw the conversation with John Lennox and Alex. It was very cordial, but a debate between those two would be epic. Would love to see them have a serious debate. So I watched the entire thing. So I watched it. Weirdly, I can't actually remember any details from it, strangely. But I did watch the whole thing. And it's not the kind of thing that there would really be much benefit to me reacting to. I mean, obviously I could force a reaction out of it, but it would be a bit of a circle jerk, because I'd be like, yeah, he's right, blah, blah, blah.
Extremely interesting.
If we could time travel, you would be one of the rough gang. So would I.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd be, I mean, even though you kind of like, the headlines of you is like, professor, sort of Oxford. Well, are you a professor?
I'm not a professor, no.
You're very clever. Do you know what I mean? That could potentially put you into the Pharisee type thing. Right. But you are the opposite. You are what you would have been running wild with Jesus, I think.
Yeah. I like to think so.
And also, I sort of always got the feel with Jesus. He loved the challenge. He loved the riposte. He loved the mental, verbal, like theological challenges.
There's a lot of jousting, a lot
of jousting, and brilliant sort of responses that have never been better. You know, whether it's in like, should we pay our taxes to Caesar or not? You know, the Pharisees are trying to trip him up, and yet sort of that response of just like, well, whose head is on the coin?
It is cute that he's just got a little dog in his lap the whole time.
You know, paid him and paid to God what is God. It's sort of brilliant.
Yeah, there's a brilliant.
And I would think that I see a beautiful alignment. Actually, I think if we would go back in time travel, you'd be running wild with him.
Well, if the science ever gets there and we manage to go back in time, when people say, you know, where would you go?
Yeah, where would you go? Come on, what would you do?
Of course, you'd go to meet Jesus.
I love it. What point? Where would you go? Would you go after the resurrection, or would you want to be there at the beginning? What about in the 17 years?
That's interesting.
I don't know when I would time travel back to. I think, to be honest, actually, I would be more interested to. I guess the problem is you know there's also the risk of are we assuming that we'll be safe? But I'd be kind of interested in time traveling back to more like when the Exodus happened. I guess the issue there though is that you wouldn't know exactly when to time it. Like how do you know? Anyway, whatever. If I had to time travel to a time when Jesus was around, I would be tempted to travel to his baptism, because that was like such a big event, and like as in like, because obviously you could say like, oh, the transfiguration, but the problem with that is that the transfiguration, only a select few people got to witness that. But I feel like anyone who was there could have witnessed his baptism, and that would have been pretty crazy.
You know, I think that the moment that you'd want to witness, if you could only have 5 minutes, would be the moment of the crucifixion. And the reason is,
I wouldn't want to witness that. That's kind of depressing.
See that this was a man. The crucifixion happened. You would see whether the curtain tore, whether the sky opened, all of that kind of stuff, and it would give you all of that. I mean,
But they keep finding evidence for like the. I think in this sort of.
One of the issues there though is you still have the possibility, even if you find out that stuff doesn't happen. Could you not say it's metaphorical? I'm just trying to think, because it's kind of like they say like, oh, the earth shook. It's like, that seems like something where even if I was to find out for an absolute fact that when Jesus was crucified, there wasn't an earthquake, that wouldn't shatter my faith. I would just think, okay, yeah, you know, it's because like that thing to say, you talk about things being groundbreaking and stuff like that. We often use that kind of language to refer to, and of course we know that the veil, the curtain in the temple ripping, that is symbolic of the priesthood of the believer, and so pretty much. So again, that could be a symbolic thing too. But also, I don't know, how would you? I guess you have to go and run to the temple and see whatever.
You know, the star stuff and they said there was.
Oh yeah, like the solar eclipse.
The solar eclipse. I've actually done it. It's the exact kind of like.
That's really interesting.
It's really interesting, and also that moment is kind of also to see the first ever Roman Christian. Well,
yes, yeah.
The centurion
truly
son of God.
Yeah.
This man is the son of God.
But then part of
that's interesting. You go to that moment. That's kind of cool.
But part of me would say, although you want to see the resurrection, you want to see part of me wants to say I would just like to meet him walking along during his ministry and just say, listen, man, I've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Who are you? Like,
are you the real deal?
Messiah? Are you God? Are you claiming to be God? Like, that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to ask that question. And I mean, where would you go in Jesus' life?
So
5 minutes.
So it's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think.
Black Friday deal.
So I mean, if you think of the biblical, so there are a lot of people that did get that chance and did it come exactly for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, say, I mean, one bit you might not have noticed that I really like is John the Baptist's relationship with Jesus. We kind of touched on it, but there's a really nice moment where if you think if anyone in the Jesus orbit is going to believe in him, it's John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
Known him from birth, kicking inside my mother's stomach whenever Jesus walked in the room. Like, I know this guy is a real deal. I'm baptizing the River Jordan, saying there was one is coming after me, is like, you know, I know. Mm-hmm. And yet when he was in Herod's prison and he gets a chance to get a message to his disciples, the one thing he says is go back to...
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was thinking. If you wanted to speak to Jesus, you would have to learn Greek, which would be, and, you know, old Greek. So that would be pretty awkward. And I wouldn't, yeah. I mean, I've tried learning languages. I'm not very good at learning languages, so I would just be in trouble. Again, I mean, obviously during Pentecost they had the Spirit come upon them and they were able to speak lots of different languages, but I don't know if that's just something they can turn on and off. So yeah, for them it is like a religion is true or atheism is true, but they only accept the theistic personal, all properties being. They don't even acknowledge any other God concept. Yeah, well, I think they would say that, oh, if there's like a different God, like there are atheists who will literally say, oh, I don't think that God can be defined, and that's the reason why I don't believe in them. Didn't Jesus speak Aramaic? Well, he would have spoken Greek, and I just feel like Greek is probably easier to learn. So he would have. I mean, he spoke 3 languages: Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew. At least, probably just those 3 though: Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew. But I wouldn't. In my head, I just imagine Greek would be easier to speak to him, and also would probably confuse him less, because I feel like if I tried to speak to him in Aramaic or Hebrew, he'd be like, "Oh, you don't sound very Aramaic or Hebrew." But if I spoke to him in Greek, he'd be like, "Okay, well, this guy's like obviously foreign, speaking the lingua franca, so it makes sense."
Yeshua, just ask him, "You really are who you say you are?
Is it you?"
And I love that, because like, if even John the Baptist had doubts, because of he's like being tortured and in a brutal prison and like...
It's worth noting, by the way, that Jesus said, amongst those born of women, none is greater than John the Baptist. So John the Baptist got Jesus' personal approval.
We're human. You know, then I can have doubts. And it's like, he's been a real hero of mine, actually, John the Baptist.
Me too. I think he's my favorite.
What's interesting is that, you know, obviously, I get that one of the things that Alex kind of said when he was getting mad about people kind of reacting in an exaggerated way to this video, he was saying like, oh, you know, like I title my videos whatever I title them, don't take them too literally, whatever. Like, yeah, most of this video is not Alex explaining why he finds Christianity more plausible than he thought. Like this title. And like, I think, I don't know, maybe that's what you got to do, and maybe you can get away with that. I feel like I don't usually title my videos. I mean, like when I made that video responding to Trent Horn, I was like, you know, I kind of worded it in a bit of a manipulative way in the title, but it was technically accurate. And then you get other people who just like make a title that's quite irrelevant to what they're talking about for most of the video.
Well, it's interesting you say that. So I'd be interested what I like about him is that everyone always, Jesus says there's no one being greater.
Yes.
He is the number one in the prophets.
That's
number
right.
one. And I always think, like, we think to be number one in life, you've got to be like a leader. You got to be like, I would think Moses or one of these people, like on top of the mountain, the big beard, the loud voice, the authority. It's how we're brought up to think these are our people in our lives who are the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it was the rough one who lived off the land and was wild and just loved this Yeshua character. You know?
Yeah.
And he said, no one better. Why do you like him?
I think he's fascinating because he seems to be this sort of precursor to Jesus in a weird way. He's the introduction to Jesus. There's a bit of mystery as to who he was and why he was baptizing and why he found his way into the wilderness and what it means to preach a baptism for the repentance of sins and why Jesus would need to undergo that. All of these questions are so interesting. There are also communities of people who particularly revere John the Baptist. There's a group called the Mandaeans who are like this Gnostic sect who think that John the Baptist is the most important prophet. Now they see Jesus as a false prophet actually. There's this whole historical like fascination with John the Baptist because he's and it's also the insistence early on that he is not the Messiah. You do it
he keeps saying I'm not the guy,
which implies to me that at the time there were lots of people who thought he was the Messiah. And
because that's what happens. People want to think somebody's great, and then the power goes to your head.
And when Herod Antipas first hears about Jesus, he goes, "This guy is John the Baptist reborn," in the Gospels. And so, what was John the Baptist doing? If when he hears this Jesus guy, it reminds him of John. So it seems like John the Baptist had this incredible ministry, and he must have been doing all kinds of interesting things, and there were all kinds of people who thought he was the Messiah. And so, and we only get clues to that in the Gospels. And so I'd be fascinated. Do you know what? Maybe I'd go to the baptism, because I'd love to meet John the Baptist.
With the sky open.
Jinx.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool to see too, you know?
Because if you see that, then you know. Because you can't fake that, you know. So in a way, that's as convincing as a resurrection. Because if you're there and you literally see this guy up in the voice of God going, "This is my son."
And the dove, you kind of get a proof of the Trinity.
Well, it's like...
You get to meet John, then you get to see Jesus. It's all there. I think
but you know what?
that
They
might
all
be the
saw
moment.
all these things. And yet still the next
still,
day, they would go, well,
not so sure.
The clouds could have... And was it thunder that sounded? And that dove, you know, there had been a few doves around that day.
Never enough. What I do know, though, is that I speak to a lot of interesting people. I speak to some scientists. If I ever meet one who tells me that they're onto something with time travel, I'll know who to call to go back and meet John the Baptist.
Cool. So that was interesting. It wasn't really, As I was getting towards the end of that video, I was thinking, well, even I don't know, like it's almost like it didn't take them that long to stop talking about the titular point of Christianity being more credible than he thought, and it just turned into, oh, I find this guy interesting, so if I could travel back in time, I would go and meet him, which is not really, I mean, you know, that's not really an argument for a religion being more credible than you thought. So, if anything, this kind of, I guess, vindicates Alex's sense that people shouldn't have taken this video to be such a significant claim to be a believer in Christianity, because he wasn't really saying he believed in Christianity very much at all. Anyway, hello there, Aketsume, I believe is your name. You've been here before, right? So the next video is going to be Mindshift reacting to this. So that's we'll see how that goes.
I love it.
Bear Grylls, thank you for your time.
So yeah, it should be called Questioning Alex O'Connor.
Honestly,
Gaza. So we'll see how this video is. I'm hoping that it won't be too much of just playing Alex's video, because obviously that's gonna be the same thing. 1 minute. I'm gonna play it. I'm just gonna pop my head out the door for a second. Oh.
What I've realized is that this is far more interesting and intricate, and I would say plausible than I'd given it credit for before.
That's a quick excerpt from Alex O'Connor's most recent conversation with Bear Grylls. The full episode of that came out 2 weeks ago, and then he posted kind of a short, which he titled, "I've Realized Christianity is More Plausible Than I Thought," on his More Alex O'Connor channel. So I'm not taking this out of context.
Do you think if the Bible didn't have miracles and not claim to be the Word of God, they will not be skeptical? That's what I said. Bold. I don't know. I mean, I suppose that the issue is, what would there be to be skeptical of at that point? So I suppose I kind of get what you're saying. In that, let's say the Bible was just a historical account, would people believe it? And I think the answer there would probably be they should, because obviously, as people pointed out, we have more the historical standard for what the Bible is saying is better than the standard for many things that people take as history. And, you know, I've kind of looked into that before.
You can go and watch the full episode. This part comes right after him kind of talking about how he matured and grew up from the New Atheist movement. And through his podcast, he has realized that Christianity is more plausible than he thought. And I want to talk about this today, and I want to set the stage a little bit. And I don't think I'm the only one, have noticed, especially it seems like over the course of the last year, a major tone shift or change from Alex, where there is this bridge building with Christians, which I have no problem with. I think that I share...
Okay, just remember, by the way, Mindshift, as I pointed out before, he has this tendency in, so far, like, the 2 other videos I've watched from him. So, I mean, it would be very funny if it happens in this video, but I would think he'd be mindful to not do that here, because he's just acknowledged, like, but whatever. He has a habit of saying that if someone is a Christian, they must automatically be bad faith. He has said that on 2 separate occasions, 2 separate videos. He has said, if you are a Christian, you are necessarily, definitionally, automatically arguing in bad faith, being disingenuous. So that kind of tells you the attitude with which he's approaching things.
There are a lot of things with Alex in this respect. I, too, find Jesus as a historical figure fascinating. I, too, love truly the story of Jesus. If you just look at it as a narration, if you look at it as myth, because we can't know how much of those details are true. Plus, we can see where authors took liberty to tie things back to the Old Testament, etc. It is a really, really cool story. From John the Baptist preparing the way, all the way to Jesus in the garden questioning his father if there's any other way. The stuff that happens at the Last Supper, the betrayal, like
there's a bit of a lag on my end. I would kind of assume this is the case for everyone else, and if so, I apologize, and I don't know what to do about it.
This is an incredible story. No doubt about it. And I, too, think that something in that region at that time with a man that probably had this or a similar name happened, and that it was...
I think the issue with... So when you admit that it's a credible story, an incredible story, rather, a story that you think is very well written, very interesting, very captivating, then you kind of are just compounding this huge issue that atheists should have about Christianity, which is, what are the odds that you get this religion, which, one, seem to line up with a lot of prophetic stuff. When you look at John the Baptist happening to have come along, having that role as the voice in the wilderness preparing the way for the Lord, you look at the way it spread and the convenience of when it emerged, that it was at the beginning of this Pax Romana where it was able to spread such a fantastic amount. And you look at the fact that it has this kind of strangely nuanced theology, which is simultaneously able to not contradict the Old Testament, but build upon it. And then on top of that, you recognize that it is also this incredible story. These are the things where I just think, what are the odds that you would have this religion that is all of those things at once? That's something which kind of very much makes atheism and any kind of non-divine explanation for Christianity less credible to me.
Unique, and that this man was probably ahead of his time. But in no way does that make me think that the actual claims of Christianity are plausible or more plausible, whatever that means. And in no way does it make me want Christianity to be true. And that's actually where the story with Alex starts for me. At the beginning of the...
Oh, well, I assumed you were being sarcastic and kind of joking. Sorry, I'm just saying to the person in the chat. He just said, I'm a Christian, by the way. Yes.
Year, I saw this clip.
My listeners know that I'm somebody who would love to be a Christian. I'd love for it to be true.
And it actually made me reach out to him because I wanted to investigate this. Alex is so freaking smart. He is so articulate that I don't...
Okay, let's calm down. He's fine. He's okay.
I don't think that this is a misspeak. And in fact, I know it's not. I've heard him say as much many other times. And there was one clip in particular I was looking for, and I just cannot find, where someone asked him, what religion would you like to be true? Not to be confused with more recently when Ruslan asked him, what denomination would you pick? What religion...
Oh, I wonder what his answer was to what denomination he'd pick.
Would you like to be true? He can say none. He could say anything. He says Christianity. Now, he caveats it, and again, take this with a grain of salt because I cannot find it, and it's been a while. He caveats it with something to the effect of, but of course, not all this stuff in the Old Testament. But here is...
That's weird. It's weird because I would think the more reasonable thing to say would be, well, of course not hell. If I were to say what religion... If I was an atheist and I was asked what religion would I want to be true, I would say Christianity, but not hell. The Old Testament stuff, I don't know what the issue is there. But yes. Hello, Hervey Schmervy.
The distinction. You can't get away from that. And this is where I feel like Alex is not being consistent. You have seen just as much as I have Alex argue very well for...
That's presumptive. You shouldn't make those presumptions. You don't know. Maybe the person watching this video, they've never seen an Alex O'Connor video before.
for the immorality of the God of the Old Testament, for the issues with that particular deity, Yahweh.
I get sick to death of people hand-waving away this genocide by some vague reference to the fact that Jesus came along to do something which somehow kind of undoes the immorality of it.
You can't say, I want Christianity to be true, or I like Jesus' story and impact so much that I think it's more plausible, without both of those sentiments tracking all the way back to Yahweh. If Christianity is plausible, then so is a God who commands genocide. If Christianity is plausible, so is hell or annihilation. So is original sin. So is submissive hierarchy.
Hold on a minute. He's saying like, so is hell or annihilation. That's a massive difference, right? Because annihilation just means what atheists already believe in. So if he's saying that it's a big problem that in Christianity annihilation is true, doesn't that mean that it would also be stupid? Like, how then is atheism better than Christianity? Because notice that Mindshift said, oh, Alex could have said none, meaning, no religion's true, I guess implying atheism. But he chose to say Christianity, and isn't this a problem? And why is it a problem? Because in Christianity, you would have annihilation be true. But that's the difference between, if we're assuming annihilationism, the difference between Christianity and atheism is in Christianity, many people will go to heaven and experience constant joy and bliss, and a few people will be annihilated. Whereas in atheism, everybody will be annihilated. So I'm kind of missing what you're getting at here.
Divine command theory, salvation being based off belief, which even Alex admits.
Sorry, okay, divine command theory is not necessarily... Wait, okay, I'm going to go back because I want to see... okay, so... Oh, hello, my play's not working.
Both of those sentiments tracking all the way back to Yahweh. If Christianity is plausible, then so is a God who commands genocide.
Okay, yeah, I don't care about that.
If
okay.
Christianity is plausible, so is hell or annihilation. So
yeah, and that's the funny one.
Is original sin. So is...
Okay, so original sin is true even if Christianity is not true, and Alex O'Connor has already acknowledged this, that we are, because original sin is basically just saying that human beings have moral agency. That is what original sin is. So even atheists should agree with that, unless this guy doesn't think that human beings have moral agency.
Submissive hierarchy.
What is wrong with submissive hierarchy? So is submissive hierarchy. Why should we not have a system of... Does this guy think that it would be a good way to organize society if every single person could just do whatever they wanted? That we didn't have any sense of like, okay, there's going to be someone in charge, there's going to be people beneath them, and we're going to have laws, and we're going to have like parents be an authority over their children, we're going to have bosses be an authority over their workers, we're going to have I'm a bit mystified there why this guy thinks that submissive hierarchy is such a terrible thing.
Divine command theory, salvation being...
Okay, divine command theory, that is not necessarily true. I do not believe in divine command theory, and I'm a Christian, so he's wrong.
Based off belief, which even Alex admits one cannot control. Salvation...
Okay, as for salvation being based off belief, which Alex will admit one cannot control, the issue there is that you need to, because I understand this idea that we don't have what's called formally doxastic voluntarism, but you can choose to misrepresent things. You can choose to refuse to engage with something in good faith. You can choose, like this guy makes choices in how he presents things. He makes choices in terms of how he's going to argue against stuff. And yeah, you can't just like a light switch decide to believe something, but you can make a decision to humble yourself when you engage with something. There's lots of things you can choose to do that can actually help you to become Christian. I don't think it is... I'm in a weird situation. Like, I would never say that there is anyone actively choosing to not believe, but I would say there are people making many active choices that lead to them not believing. Do you think an atheist can be consistent? By the way, sorry, you've been very active in the chat, and I do appreciate that. But your name is Emmanuel, isn't it? Yeah, Emmanuel. But obviously, I'm trying to make sure that we get through the video, so don't be offended if there's a few comments from yours that I don't respond to. But that's an interesting question. Do I think an atheist can be consistent? I think that in some sense my answer is yes. But I guess there's kind of like, there's two aspects to it. There's one, do I think they can be intellectually consistent on, I suppose three aspects. Because like you might say, well, how can an atheist believe that the universe exists? Because where do you think the universe comes from? But I would say, like, in that case, I think it's possible to just say, well, maybe they don't have an opinion on that. So at the end of the day, like, I might have some incorrect beliefs, and it may be the case that there are things out there that expose the incorrectness of my beliefs. But it doesn't mean I'm being inconsistent until I actually start engaging with those incorrect things, or start engaging with those implications. And atheists generally avoid engaging in those implications, which means that in a way they end up being consistent. The other thing is, you might talk about, obviously, the presuppositionalism, right? What the presuppositions of atheism, do they justify the atheist belief that the universe is knowable, that we can know it, and that we should want to know it? Now, my position on that is I would say that Christianity better justifies those presuppositions, but I personally do not engage in presuppositional apologetics in the form of insisting that atheists cannot possibly have this discussion because of their presuppositions. I would say that actually an atheist can just hold to those presuppositions with the position of, I feel like it, or whatever. I don't think they have as firm of a foundation for them, but I think they still have them. Or rather, they can still have them. And then, of course, the final sense, which you might say they're not consistent, and this is something people do bring up, is say, well, how can an atheist even live their life when they believe that there's no purpose, that it's ultimately all just going to end in nothing and blah, blah, blah. And I think that is an interesting question. The one thing I would say, just, because I'm inclined to provide some nuance on these issues, is that even as a Christian, you could kind of ask, like, are Christians even consistent in how they live their life? So that thought of, like, can you live in a way that is consistent with your worldview? And shouldn't atheists, if they have this, well, should atheists be acting as if what they're doing in life has this greater purpose? And maybe some of them do, but isn't that inconsistent with their belief that ultimately everything's just going to turn into atomic mush at the end of the universe? And that is a point that's worth bringing up. But I think, the flip side is that as a Christian, if someone was to say, oh, do you live in a way that is perfectly consistent with your beliefs? I would say, probably not. So that's kind of my thoughts. Hello, love your content. A shame so little people are on. Keep up the good work. Oh, it's fine actually. It's reasonably active. I don't mind. This number of people is like a decent amount. It was a bit rough at the beginning when there were like 0 people.
You cannot control equals a lack of free will, even within the God system.
Oh, wait. Okay, hold a minute. That was a really stupid thing to say. Wait, hold a minute. Go back. Okay, go back. That doesn't make any sense. What did he say? What did he say?
Commands genocide. If Christianity is plausible, so is hell or annihilation. So is original sin. So is submissive hierarchy, divine command theory, salvation being based off belief, which even Alex admits one cannot control. Salvation you cannot control equals a lack of free will, even within the God system, that I know Alex takes issue with, and so I just can't.
Well, hold on. No, that doesn't mean, that's not a lack of free will. The fact that we have this universe where you cannot have free will is something that Alex has admitted is the case of atheism. So this is a very bizarre thing to say, because one, like the salvation thing's irrelevant here. The question is, do we have control over everything in our lives? And if the answer is no, well, then we don't have free will. But Alex has argued at length that within atheism, we do not have free will because of the material causality of the universe. If our minds are purely material, then the material causality of the universe itself necessitates that every single feeling you've ever had, every single choice you've ever made is the natural result of physical material forces beyond your control. And theists, through Cartesian dualism, will argue that actually within theism is the only place you can find any sort of possibility of free will. Now, personally, I don't talk about free will. I don't think it's a helpful discussion to have. But Again, this is another example where this guy is saying, oh, how can Alex say that he would want atheism to be true, but then his... Oh, sorry, let me rephrase that. Rephrase that. Phrase that properly. How can Alex say he would want Christianity to be true, but then the criticism he's bringing up is something that's true even in atheism? I think, 3 of the things he's brought up have been things that are true of atheism just as much as they're true of theism. Annihilationism is more true of atheism. If atheism is true, everyone gets annihilated. Original sin, that's true of atheism, because original sin just says that our knowledge of good and evil means that we are moral agents who have moral responsibility, which either that's true of atheism, or you would say it's not true of atheism, in which case you would be arguing that, Adolf Hitler and all these other people had no moral agency and therefore no moral responsibility for their crimes. So that's not better. You'd better hope those people have moral agency. And then the third thing is what we just heard there about free will. Again, atheists, if they're being honest, will admit that there is no possibility of free will in atheism, whereas in theism there is at least a slightly better case because it's not as directly extending from material causality.
Figure out where this disconnect is. And I don't know exactly why I'm talking about it. Maybe it's just to get feedback. Maybe it's because, and I did this February of this year, I went back.
Yeah, that's kind of a good point, Emmanuel. I think a lot of these people, it's almost like obviously, I don't know if you saw it, but I did a response to Matt Dillahunty where one of the kind of focuses was Matt not really being able to understand whether Christians actually sincerely believe, and I guess kind of thinking that there was some self-delusion going on, which obviously, he'd call it self-delusion, but that clearly shows that you can motivate yourself to believe. I think obviously I was an atheist until I was 18, 19 years old, and sometimes I do think to myself, how is it that I now believe? How did that happen? How can it be that I actually went from believing to not believing? What was the mechanism there? It's a very interesting question, but yeah, obviously it's certainly possible.
And look, February 5th, I sent Alex an email asking him to have a conversation with me about this, to help clear this up for me, why someone who so understands the issues with the religion would say time and time again that he wishes Christianity would be true. And I didn't hear back, and that makes sense to me. I can't keep up with all of my emails, and he is on such another level and stage. The kinds of requests that he is probably answering are obviously the ones with these huge reaches, which I at that time didn't have. And still,
it would be kind of interesting seeing a conversation between this guy and Alex O'Connor, because and I'm not about glazing Alex O'Connor, I don't care, but I do think Alex is very good at having conversations, and this guy, he's just, everything he says to me is dripping with insincerity. There's just something about him. He just seems incredibly insincere, and a part of it is like his voice he has, the way he kind of always sounds like he's being really serious, and I'm really trying to get you to understand what I'm saying, but then at the same time, obviously, as we've shown, he says some very silly things. And I think, just to take just this video alone, the fact that he has said that Christianity is this horrible, evil worldview, and yet about half the things he brought up are just as true of atheism, if not more true of atheism.
Still don't have anywhere near what he's been doing. So no problem. But it's not like I'm just trying to attack Alex here. I genuinely respect Alex. I think he's probably the best atheist communicator out there. But again, if we go back to this noticed shift, if I'm being generous, I would say it's under the sake of intellectual humility, or again, perhaps bridge building, trying to be better.
Yeah, I don't really get why he cares so much about what Alex O'Connor thinks. Even if Alex is more convinced by Christianity, so what? I don't think it really matters. Yeah, I think part of the issue is that a lot of these people, these Christians, I think they have this idea that nobody ever sincerely converts. Nobody ever sincerely looks into Christianity and becomes more convinced it's true. I've genuinely had some of the conversations I've had with people where they've just said, "Oh, you were indoctrinated into Christianity," and like that, it's an article of faith for them that I was indoctrinated, even though whatever, that's the thing. It's just they cannot actually engage in good faith with this idea that someone looked at the evidence and was convinced the evidence fell down the side of Christianity being true. And the problem is, for them is that if Alex O'Connor did become Christian, that would be bad for their credibility when Alex O'Connor was clearly an atheist for a very long time. Alex O'Connor clearly understood the issues of Christianity, and therefore he would have to have some good reason for being Christian beyond that, and that would be kind of concerning for them, I think. You can believe in it and be indoctrined in it. I'm going to be honest, Gutlib, I don't quite understand what you're saying there. I'm guessing you were saying indoctrinated, but yes.
Better heard by the religious. But to what end? And what is being sacrificed in the meantime? He's still not a Christian. He makes that abundantly clear.
I'm still not a Christian.
But by saying the thing...
Yeah, that's kind of a good point, Richard, about like how this guy's almost like your stereotypical angry atheist.
Things that he has said, it leads all of the apologists to saying things like this.
The world's first titanium nonstick pan.
I hate when apologists say the world's first titanium.
What's forming is Alex O'Connor's going to become Christian. And I really like Alex O'Connor.
Okay, so Michael Knowles isn't a Christian.
He's very charismatic and sweet guy. But that to me is a good sign, because the fact that he's very sharp, he's all these great things, but he doesn't have hardcore answers to all of those questions. He's obviously curious. He probably hangs out with more Christians than he hangs out with atheists. The moment that he really starts to keep following that, he's going to become Christian. There's no new atheism.
I don't. We shouldn't say Alex O'Connor's going to become Christian, because he might not. That's in God's hands, and it's in Alex's hands. And yeah, me personally, like this whole thing, I think it would be nice. But again, I mean, in my head, I just think it would be nice unless he comes out and says, "Hey, everyone, I've become Christian." But there's so many. The issue is, like, one reason why I don't think we should get excited about Alex O'Connor becoming Christian is there are just so many paths where he could be like, "Hey guys, I'm a Christian," but then actually reveals he's gone in totally wrong direction. My big concern with Alex is I never see him talk about salvation. I never see him even mention salvation as a concept. The idea that he has sinned. That I know he briefly defended the concept of original sin in the discussion with Richard Dawkins, but I don't think I've ever seen him kind of recognize that the primary implication of Christianity being true is that he is a sinner who, before a righteous God, would be condemned for his sins, and Jesus Christ lived a perfect life, took the punishment for his sins, and based on that imputed righteousness, he will stand before God justified by faith alone. Obviously he wouldn't have to say that's true until he actually believes it, but he hasn't even, from what I've seen, shown much recognition of that actually being true. And then you look at a lot of the people he's speaking to, a lot of the people he's speaking to are very kind of intellectual people when it comes to all the arguments and stuff like that. But, what's missing is Pastor Jim, someone who is just going to deliver the gospel to. And I almost think to myself, genuine question, has anyone actually given Alex O'Connor the gospel? And this is one of those things people talk about where, everyone says, oh, everyone knows about the gospel by now. But Alex O'Connor's spoken to a lot of Christians. Has he ever actually spoke to someone who sat down and presented the gospel to him of, you're a sinner, you are under the wrath of a perfectly righteous God, and that God sent his son to die so that he could be both the just and the justifier of the ungodly, that when we were his enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his son, much more being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. Has anyone delivered that to Alex? And that's kind of the problem I have with this, Alex is going to become Christian. Maybe Alex will say, I've, got all of these fancy beliefs about all of this theology where Christianity is true or whatever, but if it's not about salvation, it's of no use.
Atheism is old and it's dead.
That's one of a billion clips that I could play for you where Alex has this effect. And it's really interesting, and this isn't why I made the video, but many times I get comments that are like, look at you, look how close-minded you are. You should be an atheist like Alex. He's so open and kind.
Yeah, the issue is that you are closed-minded because you literally say things, again, two out of two videos that I've watched, again, it seems like you're going to get away with it in this video. You're not going to do it in this video. But the first two videos I watched from you, you literally said, and like people can go back and they can kind of look at the, my videos, and I also made a post about another video I watched after that. You have literally said that anybody who is a Christian is disingenuous. That is you being closed-minded. This has nothing to do with Alex O'Connor. It's not like, oh, Alex said, oh, I think Christianity is kind of plausible. Like, there are people who can think that Christianity is complete nonsense, but they still might be open-minded if they're like, I think it's complete nonsense, but I still think that Christians are sincere, that I'm happy to have a discussion with them, stuff like that. That's not you.
And that's fine. If I'm considered more dogmatic than Alex O'Connor, I really don't care. Because again, we still have no actual proof for the validity of Christianity. And there is no doubt that within the source material, the things I call out are there and are harmful. I'm not going to pussyfoot around it for the sake of attracting more Christian viewers. I would hope.
I genuinely feel like I could. Like, this guy is the most entertaining person I respond to on this channel. I think I got a comment from someone that was like, oh, this guy's not really worth it. He's not worth your time. But he is genuinely the most entertaining person to respond to because he is so confident, but I've actually not seen a single... Also, he's got weird lips. Can I just say, like, he has something strange with his lips. They're very thick. It's kind of a JD Vance baby face, which I know people say, oh, that's mean, but whatever. I'm just assuming that anyone who's got this deep into the video is probably... whatever. I don't know. If you're offended, I don't care. But like, at the end of the day, I'm not saying this is why he's wrong, but I just want it on the record. He does have a bit of a baby face.
That my approach does that because I truly care.
Like, can you imagine this guy without the beard?
About truth, which Christians ideally should care about. And my stated goal might be very different than Alex's, which is I want to help people deconstructing. And sometimes they need the firmness of hearing what they have been taught that is so clearly untrue is actually untrue and for these reasons. So Alex's softening, which is maybe the best term I can do over the last year, or there's probably even better.
Yeah, I don't know, Emmanuel. Like, so this guy, for the record, yeah, he does claim to have been an ex-Christian, but it's very weird because I think he said he's an ex-evangelical, but then his he's also spoken about the original sin as if it's the kind of Catholic version of it, when that kind of suggests to me he doesn't know much. Like, it's always a bit suspicious when someone kind of says they're a former Christian, but then the theology that they seem to believe to be Christianity is not the same theology of the denomination they're claiming to have come from, because that suggests they went to somehow they got their theology mixed up, which suggests not a huge amount of knowledge on the topic. But yeah, I don't actually know what his story is about how he stopped being Christian.
In a longer time frame leading up to this, he's calling his maturity as he slams the new atheist movement. And I get the problems with new atheism, but I also don't even understand why we had a new atheism in general. Atheism is atheism. Just because four guys made some promises about what secular society could be, not that we've had the chance to see that come to fruition, doesn't mean that new atheism is stupid or...
I don't understand what you're saying by not that we've had the chance to see that come to fruition. Because much of Europe, the United Kingdom is functionally secular. Yeah, and I guess the question is, like, how is he defining secular? Because he's saying not to see, that we've had a chance to see that come to fruition. Because then I'm like, well, what about the Soviet Union, right? The Soviet Union suppressed religion. What about North Korea? North Korea has suppressed religion. So I'm wondering, like, what is his definition of secular? Because if you're just saying the majority of the population is not Christian, all right, that's most of Europe. Now, there are some parts of Europe where they actually have a nominal state church, but even then, it's not really, in any meaningful sense, a state church, because it actually bends to the will of society. Obviously, that's what we've seen with the Anglican Church. Like, you can't really say the Anglican Church is contradicting the UK being secular, because the Anglican Church is doing whatever the secular society says it should be doing. So I would say that's not... Functionally, it is secular. Because if the Anglican Church was not existing, it wouldn't be anything. But then, of course, you run into the issue of, like, nothing's really secular, because in the United States, Christmas is a federal holiday, but lots of other religious celebrations aren't. So you kind of got this question of, like, yeah, what do you mean by secular? You talk about whether most people are religious. Are you talking about the government on no institutional level having any relationship to religion whatsoever? Well, that's almost impossible, but, say goodbye to your Christmas break if that's the case. But again, the problem is religion is so ingrained in society, it doesn't really make any sense. And to even talk about having the chance to see that come to fruition, you're talking about something literally impossible. But again, if you want to talk about secular, yes, obviously, it's impossible not to mention the Marxist-Leninist countries where they enforced secularism. That I don't think you can argue was a fantastic society. You also, by the way, you have the extreme secularism of the French Revolution, where they, tried to completely get rid of the Catholic Church. And again, that was, you could say, a very short flash in the pan thing. But if you want to talk about slow burn, the slow decline of religion amongst the population in Europe, and including the UK in that, has that been fantastic? Has that been great? Is everything wonderful in Europe right now? I don't think so. So again, it's kind of this. It's almost like, obviously we talk about the real communism has never been tried. I'm fine with people, like I've kind of said before in a different context, that if someone wants to argue they have a new way of doing things, that's fine. But you can't argue, oh, we've never got a chance to see what this thing is really like. You can't say, oh, we've never got a chance to actually see the effects of secularism. Because it just sounds like you're moving the goalposts. Like if the number of people, and yeah, the problem is now Christianity is on the resurgence in the UK. So I guess we're going to miss the opportunity. But the thing is, the reason it's on the resurgence is because people are disappointed with the society we live in right now. People are disappointed with the lack of meaning, with the lack of morality, with the lack of a firm, with the effects of postmodernism, with the lack of a clear recognition of what truth is and what it means.
Wrong. It's just atheism. It's just people not believing in God, and specifically because of time and circumstance having...
North Korea has religion, all hail Kim. Still could try some more, no? Are you talking about like still could try some more secularism? I mean, yeah, sure, you could keep trying secularism, but the problem is, I don't know, I don't buy this guy's idea that that secularism is going to fix everything, because it just didn't. And this idea that we didn't get a chance to see the effects, how much chance do you want? Because I don't want society to just go completely off the rails, because we just got to keep trying harder.
The ability to actually speak out about the harm of it without fear of being killed for it. So yeah, has Alex progressed a little bit since he was 17 or 18 and wanted to be a little hitch? Absolutely. But to throw all that out is kind of this silly nonsense, as he's progressed to this moral high ground of, well, maybe it's more plausible than I thought and I want it to be true. It just hits me the wrong way. And so again, not sure the point here, but I'd love to hear your guys' feedback.
Nor did religion help the problems in the world. The issue of a statement like that is that it's not meaningful, because atheism is one thing, secularism is one thing, religion is many things. So if you want to talk about religion, I mean, the issue is like, I could defend even religions I don't care about. Islam led to the Islamic Golden Age. But and then obviously Catholicism actually did bring in a lot of scientific advancements. When you look at the rate of scientific advancement after the collapse of the Roman Empire, it just went through the roof. Like the amount of metallurgy, like essentially as science was, as practical applied science was in the Iron Age, the Roman Empire and the kind of the pagan period didn't really do very much. But then you look at, within the space of a relatively short amount of time, the like early European metallurgy and stuff like that was just like artwork. And obviously you had these incredible architectural feats, the cathedrals and stuff like that. So there was this massive advancement. But again, it's kind of, because obviously I could say, well, how about the fact that loads of people used to practice human sacrifice and that stopped? But again, what I'm saying there is the true religion, Christianity, brought about loads of advancements.
Do you see an issue with this?
doubt that the Bible told the people how science worked very much, nor did the Quran how much. Yeah, we're talking about a worldview and its implications for society. A worldview that says that there is an ultimate truth in the universe, that we are able to know that truth, and that we should want to know that truth, is more likely to lead to societal advancements regardless of anything else, regardless of what the specific religious, like even if you don't have a religious text, we're just talking a generic theism, that is going to lead to more advancement for society than a worldview that says there is no ultimate truth, there is no way we can know it because our brains are just a product of evolution that's designed to help us survive, and that's it. And there is no reason we should want to know it because there is no ultimate prescriptive value for the universe. That's not going to lead to as good results for society. That is, and look, I don't care. Look, at the end of the day, whether religion, again, meaninglessly because it's so broadly defined, but whether religion or secularism has greater effects for society doesn't affect whether it's true. But I would say that we've actually seen more advancement for society when there has been religion than we have when there has been secularism. And that most of the thing is, obviously, you know, it's a bit like what happens with American presidents, right? Where people get mad at the president because they've got to fix the problems of the person before them. And then when they're just getting around to fixing everything, then the next guy comes in. Like, essentially, you always feel like if you're mad at the president, you're probably mad at the guy who was just before the president, because effects typically take a while, especially with like economics and stuff like that, they take a while to change. In the exact same sense, when you look at the rise of secularism, yes, they had some scientific advancements, but based on the backs of what? And yeah, they did all this science shortly after as the world was becoming less Christian, they were doing all this science, but then it reached a point where suddenly it started becoming, oh, we don't even know what a man or a woman is now. Oh, like there's all these things that just, they don't know anymore. People, and you look at like the state of education in the UK. I'll say this, you know, I'm a Christian. The one time in the UK where we were really dominantly Christian as a society was the interregnum. During that period, which was, I think, an 8-year period, female literacy rose from 14% to 34%. That is a massive increase in 8 years. So there is just this clear, and why? Because the interregnum brought with it a puritanical Christianity that said that it was important for everyone to learn the Bible, everyone to understand the Bible, everyone to have a personal relationship with God. And that led to women being actively encouraged to read the Bible. And I wish I have a source for that somewhere, but it's, you know, it's from a book on the history of like feminism, and you know, it's not from someone who's religious, but the literacy rate for women just shot through the roof because people are like, oh, we need to actually learn about the Bible, understand the world. So there is just this basic fact that believing the universe has these deeper truths that we should be compelled to know leads to people wanting to understand the world better.
Do you see this as a good thing that Alex, because of this approach, is able to reach a much wider religious audience and be heard? I think there's positive there. But again, the flip side of this is, I think, a weaker position when you try to separate. This is like Christian Apologetics 101. When you try to separate the interesting story, the somewhat decent morals of Jesus, it's not like there's no problems with Jesus, from the larger claims that would have to be true about Christianity to make it real.
He just said this is Christian Apologetics 101. Is he implying that Christian Apologetics is all about insisting that the interesting story about Jesus and his morality is the main reason to believe Christianity is true? Because I've never seen a Christian apologist make that claim.
And also the baggage of the religion for wanting it to be true. And I hate to say this because I think he's leagues ahead of the average apologist, but it does seem like Alex is mixing things up in a way that we see Christians do very similar. This psychological desire, which he has stated multiple times, I want Christianity to be true, with epistemic plausibility. Christianity seems more plausible than before.
I don't think you've got any evidence of that. What we just saw the Alex O'Connor video. I didn't see any evidence from him that he was saying because he thinks Christianity would be better if it was true. That's why he thinks it's more plausible. His singular piece of evidence I think he gave in that previous video for why he thinks Christianity is more plausible is that because of all of this textual stuff we have about Jesus Christ, even if that is not strictly accurate, it gives us a broad impression of who Jesus Christ was, such that these were the things people were saying about him. And that was his reason for saying this seems like it was more plausible, because who was this Jesus guy that he had this impact? That's not saying, oh, I want it to be true. So I think he's just misrepresenting Alex there.
More plausible than before you had some of the new evidence. What evidence? Because what he points to is the impact of the story. But you can do the same thing for the...
Sorry, okay. He's not talking about the impact of the story. He's talking about the impact of Jesus' life and saying the fact that he had this impact means there must have been something incredible about him. And if there was something about him that really stood out, that really made him stand apart, that makes it more plausible that that thing was what Christianity is claiming. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. Because, and it's different, interestingly, from Muhammad. Because Muhammad, it's not clear whether or not he would have stood out as this incredible personality if Islam had not had so many successful military conquests. And indeed, actually, most Muslims really keep their details about the personality of Muhammad on the down low, because a lot of it doesn't work out very favorably for them. With Christianity, we know that the strength of it, doxastically, was that it was grounded in this personality of Jesus. And it's not the case of, oh, Christians did a really good job taking over, and that's why people thought Jesus was so incredible. No, people thought Jesus was so incredible, and that's why Christianity did such a great job at taking over. And then we have to ask, well, why did people think Jesus was so incredible? And that is a different issue. That's not just saying, oh, it's a nice story, therefore it must have been true. That's not saying, oh, the impact on society, therefore it must have been true. It's saying the impact on society suggests that there was something special about this person, and that makes the claims of Christianity, that the special thing about him was that he was God incarnate, more plausible.
Impact of Muhammad's story for Islam. And
oh my goodness, I already anticipated this. Okay, I love when I debunk people before they've even made their point.
when Alex was on with Rainn Wilson, he had no problem saying that he thinks Christianity is more plausible than Islam because Islam does not have as much historical backing. But Alex can't possibly think there's historical backing for the Exodus or even the resurrection. Having these...
Okay, he's very stupid. So the difference is that, yes, obviously you're not going to think there's historical back. Like, if he thought there was historical backing for the resurrection, then he would be a Christian, right? But the point is that with Islam, our earliest substantial sources about Muhammad's life come 2 centuries after he died. Even the most liberal, critical scholars place our earliest accounts of Jesus' life to within a century of his death. Most of them place it way earlier than that. So that's a massive difference. And there's also the fact, and another thing is you have stuff in Christianity. So first of all, let's just nod the fact, because the issue is you can just take like one thing in the Bible and say, well, there's not much historical grounding for this. Okay, sure. But then you actually look at the majority of the Bible, you take it holistically, a huge amount of it does have historical backing. And we're talking about stories about the kingdoms of Judah and Israel, the stories about, I guess that's the majority of the history, if we're being honest. But that does have a lot of historical backing. And there's also the fact with the Exodus, okay, there's a lack of evidence there. But you contrast that with Islam. Islam claims that the Kaaba, their little temple thing, was built about 2,000 years before it actually was. They are off from actual history by 2,000 years. That's pretty different, right? I think I believe I'm right that historians date the Temple of Solomon's construction to pretty much when it was actually built. Imagine if they were off by 2,000 years. That would be quite embarrassing. That would be quite an issue. So, again, you're comparing apples and oranges. You're talking about the Quran, which all of the history it's describing, it's at least, the Quran doesn't have any history about Muhammad at all. So let's say you're talking about the Islamic sources, of which all of the history they're describing, it's at least about 2 centuries removed. Again, I think it might be slightly under 2 centuries, but pretty much 2 centuries. And then a lot of what it's describing, we know for an absolute fact it's wrong. It's not correct. And you're comparing that to Christianity, which a lot of it we know for a fact is true. A lot of it we can reasonably infer is true. And the parts which we don't have much evidence for, we just don't have much evidence for them. And even then, it still lines up with history in some sense. There are parts of the Exodus account that do at least line up with history, even if the numbers are off, even if the exact sequence of events is off, even if the plagues and stuff, we're not going to believe that. But, we have evidence of a large tribe of people moving in to Egypt and settling there and then seemingly disappearing. So, and I always forget what they were called, but there was these, I might find this out just so I can, make sure I'm actually... Okay, ChatGPT, it's thinking. Oh, I wrote century, sorry. I wrote century instead of millennia. No, it's not them. It's not the Hyksos. It's a different group. I'm really annoyed. ChatGPT is going to annoy me. I want to find out their name. Yeah, Goshen. That's it. Yeah. Wait. Is this... Oh, I don't know. I know ChatGPT is getting worse and worse recently, but whatever. There's definitely, there is actually evidence that Egyptologists talk about of this group of people who inhabited a certain area of Egypt that, were basically these shepherds.
It appeals to majority, like how many people believe or how quickly the religion took off, even though we have great explanations with understanding how Rome was using it and things of this nature. It's nothing supernatural. It doesn't all of a sudden make supernatural claims more plausible.
Gottlieb says, can't there be a part of the Bible be false and the rest be still true? Is there something in it that scholars say, yeah, that's bull? Okay, well, yeah, obviously, I mean, there are some parts that are true, and that those parts are undeniably true. And even if there were some parts of the Bible that were false, those parts would still be true. But I don't think there's, obviously there's stuff that scholars will disagree. But one of the issues is scholars start with certain assumptions. The best example of this is that scholars are forced to date the Gospels later because they contain predictions of stuff that happened in 70 AD. And because scholars start with the assumption that miraculous prediction is impossible, they date anything that predicts the destruction of the Second Temple to after 70 AD, because that's when it was destroyed. But again, if you're not a Christian, you wouldn't have to believe in that.
Desiring something says nothing about the truth of it. Finding some parts more compelling than before makes the resurrection no more compelling than it was, no more plausible than it was.
Yeah, so yeah, he's just strawmanning Alex, because Alex has never said that because he thinks Christianity sounds more interesting, therefore, or more desirable, therefore it's true.
Emotional desirability and epistemic justification are simply different categories. If we blur them, we risk confusing I like the story with I think the evidence supports the story. This is what Christians do. This is what
Again, I've never heard a single Christian say this.
what Alex had previously been fighting through. And again,
I'd be interested in a single example of a Christian saying, I like this story, therefore it's true.
and I just can't understand. So maybe it's me. Help me. And this is what I wanted to speak with Alex about. The appeal to Jesus as a historical individual that lived and had a following with a very large impact is not the same as an appeal to Christianity. The Jesus aesthetic is not the same as the Christian doctrinal package. Liking Jesus doesn't make Yahweh more moral all of a sudden. In fact, again, that's what I mean by the doctrinal package. You then have to also be consistent. If you're talking about you want Christianity to be
Bro, this guy's the straw man lord. Yeah.
true, in understanding that the claim is that Jesus is God, that he is Yahweh, that he was there at creation, that it was him giving the condoning to Moses about slavery, that it was him ordering David's wives to be raped as punishment. You don't get to like human Jesus and say, therefore Christianity more plausible and I want it to be true, while rejecting all.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, yeah. Someone's going to have to, because Alex obviously has, a lot of kind of liberal assumptions, which would, I mean, I know, like he said before, the only rule that there should be about slavery is its abolition. So he would clearly need to turn his, have his mind change, turn his attitude around on God's perfect moral law. And that's something which, if that doesn't happen, it's going to be an issue. So yeah, that's something he needs to get right on, and he needs to talk to some Christians who can talk him through the slavery issue and why, regardless of what contemporary secular liberal society tells you, it's actually not a problem that in many contexts we have slavery. Slavery is just a part of human society.
Of that, which he does. Again, it's so interesting to see such a otherwise logical brain making potentially, because again, there's nuance, and he tries to give him.
Guys, I think Sherlock Holmes was a real person. No poo, Sherlock. That's what
himself some outs here and there, but potentially the very same mistakes as the apologist he so perfectly critiques. Alex keeps saying things along the lines of something must have happened. Yes, something happened that led to the cultural impact of Jesus on multitudes of generations. But that doesn't mean something supernatural happened.
Well, what's your alternative?
And until we have any reason to believe that it does, these kinds of statements.
See, okay, here's the issue. This is something that atheists say all the time, and it's a really stupid, disingenuous thing to say. They'll say, you've said this thing. It can be explained by supernatural, but until we have a reason to believe the supernatural, we shouldn't believe the supernatural is the explanation. But here's the problem. The reason to believe the supernatural is the preponderance of things that are best explained by the supernatural. So you can't say, I'm waiting for the reason to believe in the supernatural, when a natural excuse for not taking the supernatural claim seriously. Because the claims are the reason. If you're not going to look at the Bible and say, well, let me be open to the idea this is supernatural, what is the evidence you're supposed to be looking at? What is the evidence I'm supposed to believe that would convince you the supernatural exists? Because it seems to me, based on what you just said there, any evidence, if someone like, again, shows you your name written in the sky in stars, you would just say, and they said there must be some explanation. It says literally like, hey, Mindshift, I am God, worship me. And they say, there must be some explanation for this. And you say, yes, there must be some explanation for this. But just because there must be some explanation doesn't mean that we should believe it's the supernatural until we have some reason to believe the supernatural exists. It doesn't work.
Statements seem like pandering to Christians, and I don't get it. And I would hate to believe, and I am not accusing him of this, that it is him grifting in some way or money grabbing. It's because I don't believe that he's doing those things that I can't understand it. But the results are the same. The debate space loves these bridge builders. Christians want to hear that their religion could be true.
But magic never makes any sense, no? So the issue is, magic doesn't make any sense if you refuse to believe magic exists. But the issue is, if you say, well, actually, the most logical explanation for something is the correct explanation, then there will be situations where you could say the most logical explanation is magic until you have a reason to think that there is a different, alternative, more plausible explanation. That's the issue. You have to flip this round on people. When they say, oh no, you say that there must have been something special about Jesus, but we can't believe it was possibly anything supernatural. Well, what is your alternative?
True. And that even the most staunch atheist, the most popular atheist, is given it attention. And that even though he can't get himself to believe yet, there's always that ... He wishes he could. He wants to. And I love that part of his argument for his argument about divine hiddenness. That, hey, he's open. But being open, having that intellectual humility, is a stance back here. Desiring the truth of it, finding it more plausible the more that you speak about it. Those things need to be backed up more. And him not doing so, but still stating them and knowing the cultural impact that it has on the Christian community, I think is strange, to say again, the very least. So I don't want to beat a dead horse. We can keep this video short. And again, I admire his compassion, his intelligence, his ability to speak on these things in such a graceful way, the moral courage of not having to necessarily choose a side. I don't think that he is betraying atheism, but I simply cannot understand what is happening. Tell me your thoughts. What am I missing? What clips have you seen that I haven't? Does this even matter? Is the impact overall better or worse by someone softening Christianity when they don't believe in it in this way, though they already do know the harm? It just seems like he's not connecting the dots. You tell me. So I'm going to shut up. Thanks for being here. I will hopefully see you.
Okay, that honestly, that wasn't a terrible video. Whatever. I think it was fine. I didn't hate it. And overall, I mean, he managed to go through an entire video without saying that anybody who's a Christian must automatically be disingenuous and arguing in bad faith. So, well done. Round of applause there. Overall, I mean, let me just say this right way. Obviously, as a Christian, I'm still a Christian at the end of that, but to be fair, this video wasn't him trying to show why Christianity is false. This video was him explaining a grievance he has with Alex O'Connor, saying that he finds Christianity more credible than he initially did. So that's fine. That's an okay thing for him to put focus on. And I will just say that, yeah, I didn't have a bad time. And next video, I'm actually quite excited for the next video. I believe the next video is called 7 Questions for Christians, something like that. Let me check, actually. I'm going to tell you what the next video is called. So, because yeah, I'm excited for this one. It's called, it's by, I believe the guy's called Prophet of Zod. 7 Questions for Christians. That's going to be fun, right? 7 Questions for Christians. So, I'm going to enjoy that. But until then, I'll just say goodbye, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for populating the chat. Everybody, whether you are a atheist, Christian, anything else. Is this Thwigo Mesa about to say that he was? Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were going to. You were just gonna say that you only got here at the last minute, but yeah. All right. Anyway, yeah, but thank you everyone for being here. Please do remember to give the stream a like on your way out. It's really appreciated. And I'll see you